Hello. Welcome to my brand new series, Fanfiction, Fan Fact, where I'm going to explain what is fanfiction and some other common kind of questions that I've heard people ask about it. Why am I doing this? In 2019, I went to a writing festival, and in that writing festival, one of the talks that I went to was about fanfiction. It was unfortunately bad, and there are a variety of reasons for that, including the fact that the person who was supposed to be doing the talk ended up having to call out sick at the last minute. No blame, no shame. It's bad to call out sick when you're sick. But it did mean that unfortunately a lot of people's first exposure to fanfiction, or a lot of people who had questions about fanfiction, couldn't really get their questions answered because the person doing the talk didn't know the answers to the questions. And so I've been sitting on that for the last 7 years thinking I could have done a better job. So here I am, putting my money where my mouth is, as it were, or putting my mouth where my mouth is, I suppose. What are my credentials? Why do I feel like I'm the right person to talk about this? Well, I've been in the fanfiction space as a reader and a writer for about 20 years now. I write and publish original books, and I also share free original short stories every single week over on noodles.wordpress.com. So I'm pretty prolific as a writer and a reader. And I feel like I have the knowledge to be able to answer a lot of the questions that I've heard about fanfiction before. And if you have any questions about fanfiction, please do comment and ask me what they are so that I can add them into this whole system, or just respond. So let's get into it. We're going to build you a solid foundation before we move on to any of the detailed questions. You know, the base question, the fundamental. What is fanfiction? So fanfiction, you can probably extrapolate from the terms fan and fiction that it is fiction by fans, right? That is the simplest explanation. But what does that mean is definitely a question that comes up after you've done the simplest explanation. And the thing is what that means does kind of vary. Because fanfiction is a really, really wide range of things. But generally speaking, fanfiction is writing or comics, but narrative, I suppose, is what I mean. And I'm specifically going to be talking mostly about writing because that's most of the fanfiction that I interact with. Fan art is a separate thing that's over there. Super cool, but we're not really discussing that. Fanfiction is what we're talking about. And comics kind of straddle the border between fan art and fan fiction because there is a narrative, but there is also art. So when it comes to fan fiction, it is, as I said, fiction written by fans. But what does that mean? Well, it means basically taking a worldscape that already exists and doing something with it. Now, this can be anywhere from taking a customizable protagonist in a video game and writing out their version of the story with more of their backstory and personality that you would have liked to give them that's not possible within the parameters of a coded video game, and writing up the actual narrative of the video game just with more detailed character relationships and stuff based on your experience with your customizable character, all the way through to coming up with brand new characters to put in a worldscape that already exists in a completely new narrative, or taking characters that exist in a piece of work and putting them into a brand new worldscape and a brand new situation and seeing what their characterization from the game, it doesn't have to be a game, from the original piece of media would turn into. But I'll be more specific because that's quite vague. So that's the spectrum to my mind of how this works. And then when it comes to more specificity, there are 100,000 ways to do fanfiction. So there is what would be categorized under quite a broad umbrella of fix-it fic. So fix-it fic is where you find something you don't like in the narrative of the original piece and you fix it. So you change it to be more to your liking. That can, again, come in a variety of formats. That can come through the lens of making two characters who are not canonically in a relationship be in a relationship, everything else plays out the same. It can be, I didn't like what happened at... Let me think of a piece. I didn't like how Will Macbeth did the thing with larynx in the second Guardian Cadet book. So instead, I'm going to make this happen with larynx, and everything else is going to play out. Like, we're going to see what plays out after that. This is a thing that I think is fundamentally like wrong with the Guardian Cadet series. Obviously, that's my own series. I wrote the Guardian Cadet series. I like to use my, if you've never been here before, I like to use my own books as examples, because then I'm not like accidentally bad-mouthing somebody else's book. I don't want to do that. I don't think I did anything wrong with larynx, for the record. This is just an example of something that somebody might take issue with and therefore want to change, which is what a fix-it-fic is. There's also, I didn't like how the ending went, so a fix-it-fic can be post-credits, as it were. So like after the ending of the book, you can change things and that still counts as a fix-it-fic. But that also fills into what I'm going to describe next, which is a precursor or post-cursor. That's not a word. What am I trying to say? A story that precedes or proceeds the piece of media in question. So for example, you could take Not That Kind of Dandy, and you could have the preceder be like the scandal that Nat's involved in high society, or their time on the naval ship, or like all of these stuff. None of this is spoilers. Or you could have like the pirate lord's life before Nat ever appears, or you know, so on and so forth. Like, you can look at the stuff that came before the books started and start filling in precursor. What do you think led to the point of the first book? Like, especially because you get given lots of information about it but not a great amount of detail, and you start filling in those details. And ditto, you could take Not That Kind of Dandy and take the, again, I'm not going to do any spoilers, take the end point that I leave the book at and extrapolate what happens next. How do we move on from here? What does that look like for the characters? Fix-it-fics don't have to centre the main character. Not fix-it. Precursor and postcursor don't have to centre the main character either. It could be centering like the previous generation or the next generation. That's very common, especially in pieces with romances that end up like closed at the end of the series, and therefore lots of people have children and lots of people like reading about what happens if people have children. So you could do, like, some people do fan fiction that focuses on the couple in question opening their family to include more members, or what happens when they have, what happens if they had kids, and then what happens with those kids, where do those kids go? That's particularly common in, for example, Dragon Age fandom, because in Dragon Age fandom there is this big realm, and I think this is really particularly interesting for me for Dragon Age, is that because the Dragon Age franchise spans such a long period of time, like the first game is 10 years before the third game and the third game is, I think it's also 10 years before the fourth game. So like, when it comes down to it, you have these spans, and obviously if that is true, that's 20 years between game 1 and game 2. So a lot of people have the thing of, what would the protagonist of game 1's child be doing in game 4? And that technically would, I think, under my very broad, vague categorizations that are in no way official, would count as a post-cursor fic. What is the word for that? There are also other formats of fic that you can write. One, exist in the world. There is the ability to take characters into a new environment. We'll get to the Aeneid in a minute, don't worry. Actually, like, yeah, technically the Aeneid is a post-cursor fic, but we'll get to that in a minute. You can take characters into a new environment, or take a new environment. No. You take characters into a new environment, or put new characters into the environment. So you could, for example, take two characters from the Guardian Cadet series and put them into like a contemporary setting, or put them into the Interplanetary Alliance books setting. Like, you could lift characters out and put them in a new environment, and kind of the goal is to maintain the character. The general goal is to maintain the characterization, but see how different settings would affect these people. So, for example, one thing that I read recently by a fanfiction author I like was, so I read a bunch of their stuff, and then this came up, and I was like, sure, I'll give it a shot, because it's not my usual like thing. But basically, the thing that I found recently was these two characters from a franchise. I'm not saying what. Two characters from a franchise who got put into a bodyguard setting. So there's like, it's a modern with magic AU. So modern with magic is a contemporary, it's an urban fantasy setting basically. It's a contemporary setting, but there is also magic. And that's particularly common if your original piece of media that you're drawing from has magic in it. So for example, if you took characters from the Guardian Cadet series, which has magic in it, and you put them into a modern with magic, they would be able to maintain all of the magic that they use in the Guardian Cadet series, but they have cars and, I was about to say hoodies, but they do have hoodies already. But you see the point, I hope. And yeah, the exploration is, how do these two characters interact when one of them has to bodyguard the other, and it happens to be a modern setting. And then there is also putting new characters into the setting, so coming up with your own original characters, or even taking characters from a different piece of media and putting them into somebody else's setting. The next piece of the what is fanfiction question is, to my mind, why do people do this? And this is one of those ones that can be really confusing for people who aren't interested in fanfiction, right? So people who aren't interested in fanfiction do often ask, why? Why not just write original fiction? Why not come up with your own characters and your own world state and just write that? Why are you writing about somebody else's characters? Because one of the big like core tenets of fanfiction as a transformative work, that's what it is technically, is that if you're earning any money from it, suddenly it becomes this very legally dubious area. So like, don't try and sell your fanfiction. Like, you can do it for the love of fandom, and that is very much what it is. Like, if you can't sell it, you can't sell it. It's not cool. So people are very confused, especially when they find out you can't sell it. Like, are you just practicing to write like a real book? Heard that exact question. And it's not true that every fanfiction author wants to be an original fic author. I mean, obviously I am, but not everybody wants that. Not everybody is aiming for that goal, because not everybody wants to be an author, right? I mean, I don't know how one wouldn't want to be an author, but not everybody does, and that's completely reasonable. So how are these people like blasting out novel-length fanfictions? It's because it's a fun, community-centered fandom activity, right? Like, that's what it is. It's like going to Comic-Con in a cosplay. It's like meeting up online or in person with other people who are also fans of the thing. Have you ever done the thing? Maybe you haven't. Have you ever done the thing where you've gone to like I don't know, Lord of the Rings festival type of thing? So like, there's going to be a screening of all of the movies, extended edition, and it's at a public place, and a bunch of people have gone, and some people are in like hardcore costumes, and some people are like just wearing a simple cloak, but like dressed for the event, and some people are just in like regular normal people clothes, and some people are even like, or some people are wearing like themed t-shirts, and then some people are just in like regular normal people clothes. But that kind of an event is a fandom event, and it's the community that you feel when you go to an event like that people are kind of digging into with fanfiction. It's the joy of creation, and it's the joy of whatever piece of media you are writing and reading fanfiction of. And it's the chance to make friends, right? Like, most fanfiction posting sites have the ability to have conversations in comments and on the side of the fanfiction. At which point you have a very strong chance of making some really good fandom friends through this medium. And that's a really common desire for people who are writing fan fiction, is this want to connect with other people who also really love the piece of media that you have written this fan fiction for. It is more difficult when you're trying to carve a very fine boundary between your career writing and your fandom writing, but it's not impossible. So, then, what's the Aeneid got to do with all of this? I really hope I brought up the Aeneid, because I have had to refilm this video a couple of times. So I hadn't brought up the Aeneid. I think of the Aeneid as a really prime example of fanfiction before it was termed fanfiction. The Aeneid is a classic literature, and I mean properly like classical. It's ancient Roman literature. What are you using your BA for these days, Will? So basically what the Aeneid is, to my mind, and the best way I've got of phrasing this, now that you know what fanfiction is the Aeneid is fanfiction of the Iliad. So the Iliad is the story of the Trojan War, right? If you don't know, that's completely fine. I'm going to tell you everything you need to know. The Iliad is the story of the Trojan War. It is, I'm going to say written, because we're trying to keep it simple, by a non-contemporary source. So the Iliad itself is both a historical document and a mythological document, right? It's a story and it's historical. Accept that as it is. We're not gonna dig into that box. Here is the box. That's what the Iliad is. It's the story of the Trojan War. There are characters in it that most people have heard of. I mean, there have been a lot of Trojan War films. There are characters that most people have heard of. There's Achilles and Patroclus. There is Menelaus. There's Agamemnon. There's Odysseus. Yes, Odysseus from the Odyssey, because the Odyssey is like, I'm gonna say the sequel to the Iliad. There's Hector, the Trojan prince. There's Paris, the Trojan prince. There's Cassandra, the prophet. All of these people are people. There's Ajax the Greater and Ajax the Lesser. All of these people are in the Iliad. It's a very big book. It's very hard to read. I had to for my BA. But the point is that with the Iliad, that's the story of the Trojan War. The Aeneid is the story of Aeneas. Aeneas is a Trojan prince who leaves. I'm thinking, oh my gosh, it's been a long time since I read the Aeneid because I don't really like it. No offense to people who love it. That's completely fair. Everybody has preferences. The Aeneid is the story of a Trojan prince who leaves at some point and goes on to destroy the city of Carthage, which is in Sicily, and then found the city of Rome. Now, you may be questioning, if you've ever heard the story of the founding of the city of Rome, how in the world does Aeneas found the city of Rome when the city of Rome is supposed to be founded by Romulus? That's why it's called Rome. I would love to tell you, but I don't know. So basically, when it comes to the Aeneid, it was written several hundred years after the Iliad. It was written several hundred years after it. It was written by a completely different author with no connection to the original author. And it contains a character who is such a throwaway nothing character in the original Iliad that nobody remembered him until the Aeneid came around, basically. It takes him completely out of the context of the Trojan War, turns him into an Achilles figure because there's this whole thing with the shield. In the Iliad, this is actually relevant. In the Iliad, there's like a wax lyrical situation. Thank you, big truck. Bye bye. There's this whole wax lyrical situation about Achilles' shield. Is it Achilles' shield? I'm pretty sure it's Achilles' shield. Where it's like the best shield anyone's ever seen. Oh my god, it's so pretty. Look at it. Look at all the things. It's so detailed and it's so perfect and it's so good at being a shield, which one would hope. In the Aeneid, Aeneas also gets one of these wax lyrical about his shield, and it is point for point almost identical. But the scenes depicted on it are slightly different, and the format of the shield is more Roman because it's being written by a Roman author. Now, nobody sensible within the classical academic environment will take the Aeneid as fanfiction as a statement without argument. Because believe me, I tried. Nobody will take that. They're all like, no, it's not fanfiction. It's not fanfiction. It's a real classical piece of literature. That does not make it not fanfiction. It just means that the rules about fanfiction were different back then. Now that I've said this, of course, you will start seeing how, where, and when there are other pieces that could very easily be considered fanfiction. Like, again, we get into the very grey, muddy area of rewrites and retellings. Is it a fanfiction? In my mind, pretty much. The reason you can sell those, however, is because you are you're utilizing something where the copyright is way out of date, right? Or doesn't exist for some reason. Like with a fairy tale, that is a piece that is in the public domain. The general beats of a fairy tale, for example, say the Cinderella story, where it's the evil stepmother, the young lady of good fortune becoming like enslaved in her own household, the prince, the ball, the shoe, or some other thing left behind by which to find this young lady, and the revelation, the falling love, the happily ever after. Those 6 plot points, those are in the public domain. Having Cinderella be specifically designed after a Cinderella that exists in a specific piece of media, like the Drew Barrymore Ever After. Is it Ever After or just Ever After? I can never remember. Or the Disney Princess version, or there's another one. I mean, even the terrible Amazon jukebox musical version of Cinderella, the Rodgers and Hammerstein Cinderella, all of these, like you're stepping into very muddy water when you get to drawing inspiration from those. There's a whole conversation that could be had about Wicked and fanfiction, and I'm pretty sure somebody's having that conversation. It's just not me. Because Wicked and the Wizard of Oz, and the Wizard of Oz the movie, and the Wizard of Oz the book, and Wicked the musical, and now Wicked the movie, they're all like muddied together in this awkward fanfiction landscape. But yeah, honestly, Wicked the book is fanfiction of Wizard of Oz in some form. I'm not saying if it's actually, no, I am saying, because it's in the book Wicked, which I have read, she has silver slippers, which is what they have in the book. They were made into ruby slippers for the Judy Garland movie because it looked better in Technicolor, and they were doing some fun stuff with Technicolor. No shade, no shame. But in the original book, they're silver slippers. So in the Wicked book, they're silver slippers. So really, there is a lot more drawn from the original book of The Wizard of Oz in the book of Wicked by Alexander. I don't remember his name. But the musical starts really melding things together and binning a lot of the stuff from the book. And by the way, that book is not suitable for children. I read it as a teenager. So I have no room to talk. I read it as a teenager because I had the safety net of knowing that if I came across anything overwhelming in a book that overwhelming, upsetting, or too old for me, like I decided what that was, I could go to my mum and be there like, hey, this was a bad idea. And she'd be there like, we're okay. Do you need to ask me any questions about anything you saw? Because she was great. Is great. She's still around. She's still around and she's still being great. I don't know why I said was. But I suppose in that specific setting, I don't really need to like take books to her and be there like, this was too much, can you help me anymore? Because I'm an adult now, and I'm more capable of being able to handle these things by myself. But anyway, the point is that there are a lot of pieces that honestly probably would be termed fanfiction, or could be termed fanfiction, that are not, because they are seen as like too separate from the original piece, or they are seen as having too much prestige to be allowed to have the title of fan fiction. But they are. I think anything licensed immediately becomes not fan fiction. So like, for example, if you took a I'm just going to use a real series again. If you took, for example, Star Trek. Now, I'm not saying any subsequent Star Treks are fan fiction or not. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that because every single subsequent Star Trek series has been a licensed Star Trek series, that is the barrier between them ever being considered fan fiction and them being considered, original fiction. Because a fan could... I love Star Trek Lower Decks. A fan could write Star Trek Lower Decks, or could have written Star Trek Lower Decks. And if they don't get access to the IP, which is the intellectual property rights and the license to be able to make it officially Star Trek, that gets relegated to no money for you fan fiction. But if you get access to the IP and the licensing rights, you can make it officially Star Trek. That is, in the modern age, the difference between fan fiction and subsequent subsequent pieces of the original media. The difference is the license. And that is where stuff that is outside of copyright licensing needs becomes the question mark. And I think it's a very interesting conversation. And nobody I've ever met agrees with me about that. So, there you have it. I hope that wasn't too confusing, because I definitely lost my train of thought a little bit in the middle of that. Hilariously, somebody a couple of months ago said your videos would be better if you had notes. Hilariously, I do have notes for this. No less tangents for you. So in my list of episodes for this series, which bear in mind I don't know what order these are coming in or when they're coming either, I do already have what is self-insert or reader insert fanfiction, because it's a very specific thing that does confuse people. I also have what is shipping is fanfiction practice or good practice for original writing, which I did vaguely discuss in my fanfiction made me better at writing sequels video back in 2022. I'm on a grey sofa with a white wall behind me. And it's sort of at a weird angle. And then I think the thumbnail I have Marilyn finding the air held aloft as the purple Guardian Cadet book with the little silhouette on it. Anyway. And then I also have the question of, is it just smart? Because that's a question that pops up a whole hell of a lot. Not going to discuss any of those now, but if you are interested in finding out anything about these specific ones, if there is a playlist, I will link it. So if you've come to this 6 months late to the party, welcome. Or if you want to follow me on this journey, you can click the like and subscribe buttons right next to the description box, where any links that you need will be, including links to my original fiction, but not to my fan fiction, because that is private. I will see you in 2 weeks' time with something else. I don't know what yet. Have a great 2 weeks. OC Kiss Week is next week. I am trying to write a story for every single day of it. So that's Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. But I make you no promises, as always, because sometimes life gets in the way. See you in 2 weeks' time. Bye.